Scream all you want. Fucking die with your baby for all I care. Take your goddamn pain and you're screaming with you. You'll never ruin my life again. You're nothing to me now. Get the fuck out. Those were the vicious words her white husband, Mark, spat as labor pains ripped through her black body. Instead of holding her hand, he threw her into the goddamn streets. Instead of love, he gave her humiliation and abandonment in her darkest hour. He thought he had crushed her spirit forever, leaving her to suffer alone like she was less than nothing. But he never imagined, not in his wildest, most arrogant fucking dreams, that the same woman he cast out in agony would one day rise in a way no one could have seen coming. A resurrection that would not only shatter his pride, but also tear apart the very life he thought would bring him joy. Sometimes the ones you discard in pain return with a power that can fucking level mountains. Sometimes the woman you thought would die in silence becomes the one whose shadow you cannot escape. This is the story of a woman betrayed at her weakest, who rose with a strength no one could deny. The first contraction hit like a freight train she couldn't outrun. Emma Parker, her body slick with a cold sweat, leaned against the hallway wall of the home she'd painted herself. She called out, her voice tight with pain. Mark, for God's sake, it's time. We have to go." He stood in the bedroom doorway, a silhouette of pure indifference. His suit jacket was half on, his phone glowing in his hand. He didn't look worried. He looked fucking annoyed. "Now?" he said, his voice dripping with contempt. "Of course it would be now. You always did have a flair for the dramatic." "Please," she breathed, doubling over as another wave of agony seized her. "The hospital. My bag is ready. Just help me to the car." Mark's mouth curled into a sneer that made her stomach clench harder than the contraction. "Help you? After all the shit you've pulled?" "No." She blinked, the word not registering through the haze of pain. What do you mean, no?" He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a low, menacing growl. Each word was a punch. "You don't tell me when to jump anymore, Emma. You don't get to trap me with your tears and your perfect fucking timing. I'm done." Another contraction, fiercer this time, ripped a strangled cry from her lips. She grabbed the doorframe, her knuckles white. "I'm in labor, you asshole. I'm not trapping you. I'm having our baby." He snorted, a harsh, ugly sound. "Our baby? Don't give me that bullshit. We both know what this was. A leash. A way to keep me tied to your chaotic, emotional fucking circus. It's not happening." "Please," she whispered, her voice finally breaking, shaking with pain and a dawning, sickening horror. "Please don't do this to me. Foru." He ignored her plea. He picked up the suitcase she'd packed with tiny onesies and blankets, wrenched the handle up, and fucking flung it outside. The bag bounced down the concrete steps and landed in the wet grass with a pathetic thud. Her breath hitched in her throat. "Scream all you want. Fucking die with your baby for all I care," he said, his eyes as cold and dead as a shark's. "Take your goddamn pain and you're screaming with you. You'll never ruin my life again." "Mark," she cried, a raw, desperate sound. "Don't." "You're nothing to me now," he said, his face a mask of stone. "Get the fuck out." He shoved her. It wasn't a hard shove, not enough to send her flying, but it was hard enough to make the message brutally clear. "Get out, or I'll make you." She stumbled, catching herself on the porch railing, and felt a terrifying rush of pressure low in her back. The front door slammed shut so hard the glass in the side light rattled. For a long moment, Emma just stared at the solid wood grain, at the spot where her hand had rested 1,000 times, where she'd once felt safe. Another contraction tore through her, a guttural moan escaping her lips. She clutched the railing, biting the inside of her cheek so hard she tasted blood, anything to stop from screaming his name again. A porch light flicked on across the street. A neighbor, Mrs. Gable, a white woman with meticulously curated flower beds and a perpetually suspicious expression, stepped out in a silk robe. "Everything okay over there?" she called, her voice small and laced with a nosiness that felt like another form of judgment. Emma forced herself to stand upright, the humiliation a burning fire in her gut. I need a ride to the hospital." The woman hesitated, her eyes flicking past Emma toward the dark, silent house. She clutched her robe tighter. "It's awfully late," she said, her tone shifting from curious to dismissive. "Where's Mark?" "Inside," Emma said, her voice cracking on the word. Please." Mrs. Gable took a small step back. "Well, I can call you a cab." "Thank you," Emma whispered, swallowing the stone of degradation. The neighbor vanished back inside her warm, safe house. Time seemed to warp, stretching and slowing to a crawl. A cold wind whipped through the manicured suburban street, chilling her sweat-soaked skin. She tried to breathe, to do the bullshit exercises the nurse in the birthing class had taught her. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Focus on a point. She focused on a crack in the sidewalk, on anything but the searing pain, and the fact that the man she married, the father of the child fighting its way into the world, had just bolted the door. Mrs. Gable reappeared, holding her phone out like a shield. "The cab will be here in 10 minutes, she announced, avoiding eye contact. "Do you need a towel or something?" "I'll be fine," Emma said, because what the fuck else was there to say? The woman lingered for another awkward second, then retreated into her house and shut her door too. Another door closed in her face. Emma breathed and bent and breathed again, her body a war zone. Minutes bled into each other, each one a fresh eternity of pain. Finally, the cab's headlights cut through the darkness at the end of the street. The driver, a kind-faced man with tired eyes, took one look at her crumpled form and jumped out. "Hospital?" he asked, his voice gentle. "Yes," she managed, climbing into the back seat with agonizing slowness. "Please, fast." On the ride, she pressed her forehead against the cool glass of the window and tried not to cry. She failed. Hot tears streamed down her face anyway, silent tracks of betrayal. The driver glanced at her in the rear-view mirror. "You want me to call your husband?" he asked softly. She stared at the dark, silent screen of her phone. "No." He just nodded and drove faster. The city at night looked cruelly normal, like her world wasn't imploding. Stores were closed, streetlights hummed their electric song. Somewhere in a distant car, someone laughed. Emma dug her nails into the cheap vinyl of the seat, anchoring herself to the pain. At the hospital, the driver helped her to the automatic doors of the emergency entrance. "You're okay," he said, his kindness a balm on her raw nerves. "You're here now." The doors opened with a pneumatic sigh. The waiting room was a sterile, fluorescent-lit purgatory, smelling of antiseptic and quiet despair. A triage nurse looked up from her desk, saw everything in a single, practiced glance, and immediately stood up. "How far apart are the contractions?" the nurse asked, her arm already around Emma, steering her toward a wheelchair with an efficiency born of years of practice and kindness. 3 minutes, Emma gasped. "Maybe 2. I can't tell anymore. It just hurts." "First baby?" "Yes." "Any support person with you?" the nurse asked, her eyes scanning the empty doorway for a partner who wasn't fucking coming. Emma just shook her head, the shame hot on her cheeks. "Just me." The nurse's eyes softened with a flicker of understanding. "Well, tonight, I've got you," she said. "Let's go." They took her vitals. They strapped monitors to her belly, and the sound of her baby's heartbeat filled the small room. A frantic, galloping drum that was both terrifying and reassuring. Thump, 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 thump. A life separate from her own. A life worth fighting for. Emma closed her eyes and let the sound anchor her in the storm. "You're brave," the nurse said, adjusting a strap. "You're doing great." Brave felt like a word that belonged to other people, to women in movies, not to her. But Emma nodded anyway, too tired to argue. Hours built and broke. Pain rose in massive, crashing waves and receded into brief, gasping moments of peace. Nurses changed shifts. A doctor with soft, competent hands and a calm voice came in. She introduced herself as Dr. Ortiz and checked Emma's progress. "We're getting there," Dr. Ortiz said, her voice a steady presence in the chaos. "You're so strong." Emma turned her face to the cool metal of the bed rail and breathed. Memories broke through the pain, rude and sharp. Mark's voice on their wedding day. Mark's laugh when he used to make her tea. Mark's hands on her shoulders the day he promised her forever. When had it all tilted? When had their love become some kind of sick scoreboard she didn't even know they were keeping? Her phone, lying on the bedside tray, buzzed. She glanced at the screen. A text from a number she hadn't saved, a name she knew all too well. Vanessa. "He's with me now. Focus on your little project." Another contraction slammed through her, so powerful it stole her breath. She squeezed the rail until her bones ached and whispered, "God, please." The nurse, whose name was Chloe, touched her shoulder. "Don't read anything tonight," she said softly, her eyes full of a wisdom that went beyond medicine. "Let it wait." Emma nodded, fresh tears running clean tracks down her face. In another part of the city, in the clean, minimalist kitchen that had stopped feeling like home weeks ago, Mark poured 2 glasses of expensive whiskey. Vanessa, his pretty, polished, and equally white affair, leaned against the marble countertop, her blonde hair perfect even at 2 a.m. "Is she gone?" Vanessa asked, her voice a silky purr. "Finally," Mark said, taking a large swallow of whiskey. "She'll be fine. She's pathologically dramatic." "You pushed your wife out of the house while she was in labor, Mark," Vanessa said, a calculated glimmer in her eye. "That's not dramatic. That's intense." "She's not my fucking wife," Mark snarled. "Not anymore. You know what she is? A liability. A goddamn anchor. The last year has been a circus. Mood swings, tears, baseless accusations. You saw it." Vanessa took a delicate sip of her drink, watching him over the rim of the glass. "I saw you texting other women while she was asleep in the next room." He shrugged, a dismissive, arrogant gesture. "She was sleeping. I was awake. It's not a federal crime." "Of course not," Vanessa murmured, tucking that little admission away for later. He moved toward her, backing her against the counter, and kissed her like he was trying to prove a point, to erase the last few hours. She let him, then pulled back, her eyes bright and strategic. "When do we go public?" she asked. "Photos, the ring, our new life. I want them to see it. I want everyone to see it." "Soon," he said, his hand tracing her jaw. "After she's been handled." "Handled how?" A cruel smile played on his lips. "Her mother is on my side. Margaret understands the importance of stability. She'll tell everyone Emma was unstable, that she had a breakdown. It won't be hard to sell. The woman cried in the fucking grocery store once because they were out of her favorite brand of grapes. People remember shit like that. They'll believe it." Vanessa laughed, a sound like tiny, tinkling bells of ice. Poor, unstable Emma, all broken up over some grapes. "Poor me," Mark corrected, his voice dead serious. No goddamn peace. Back at the hospital, the hours turned liquid and strange. Emma's world narrowed to the rhythm of her own breath, the steady coaching of the nurse's voice, the doctor's calm hands, and the way the room's clock ticked, each second a hammer blow counting her down. She finally asked for pain relief when the edges of her vision started to blur. They gave her an epidural, and it took some of the fire away, but not the work. The pressure was immense, a force of nature using her body as its vessel. Between contractions, her mind drifted to names she had loved since she was a girl, names she'd whispered to herself alone in the old house she had grown up in, back when the world felt safe and simple. Her mother's voice, sharp and critical, cut across the memory like a knife. "Emma, you dramatize everything," Margaret would say whenever Emma cried as a child. It wasn't that bad. Girls like you need to learn to be quiet. Girls like you. She had let that phrase settle deep in her bones, a poison she hadn't known how to purge. The door to her room opened. A social worker stepped in and spoke to the nurse in a hushed tone. The nurse nodded and left for a moment. When she returned, her mouth was set in a tight, unhappy line. "What is it?" Emma asked, her voice hoarse. "Your mother is here," the nurse said carefully. "Do you want to see her?" Emma's first instinct was a visceral, screaming no. Her second, born of a lifetime of seeking approval she never received, was softer. She gave a single, hesitant nod. "Okay." Margaret entered, clutching a tight purse that matched her tighter eyes. Her perfume, expensive and cloying, was too sweet for the sterile room. "Emma," she said, her tone as flat and unforgiving as a tabletop. "You look exhausted." "I'm in labor, Mom," Emma said through gritted teeth. Margaret sat gingerly on the edge of the visitor's chair, as if it might stain her designer coat. "I heard. Mark called me." Emma flinched as if struck. "He called you?" "He's worried about you, dear," Margaret said, her voice a masterpiece of condescending concern. "He said you've been difficult." "I begged him for a ride to the hospital," Emma said, her voice trembling with rage and disbelief. "He threw me out of the house." Margaret's mouth tightened into a disapproving line. "He said you were screaming. You frighten people with your emotions, Emma. You always have." Emma just stared, speechless. "We need to talk about what's best for the baby," Margaret continued, glancing at the nurse as if seeking an ally. "Mark is stable. He has a lovely home, a good job. You don't even have a plan. Perhaps we should discuss temporary custody. Just for the short term, of course. Until you're settled." The nurse shifted, moving closer to Emma's bed, a silent, protective presence. Emma's lips trembled. "You're taking his side." "I'm taking the baby's side," Margaret said, her voice cold. "Look at yourself, alone in a public hospital. You could have prepared better. You could have tried harder with your husband." Emma searched her mother's face, a desperate, last-ditch effort to find some flicker of love, of maternal instinct. All she found was judgment dressed up as concern, a lifetime of it. "Please leave," Emma whispered. Margaret blinked, genuinely offended. "Excuse me?" "Please leave," Emma said again, her voice steadier this time, fueled by a sudden clarifying anger. "You don't get to sit here and call me unstable while I am bringing a life into this world. Not tonight. Not ever again." Margaret stood, clutching her purse like a shield. "You always push away the people who are trying to help you. Don't come crying to me when you can't pay your rent." "I won't," Emma said, the words a quiet promise to herself. Margaret left with a sharp click of her heels and a lingering cloud of her suffocating perfume. The door closed. For a long beat, the room just held the sound of Emma's breathing. The nurse squeezed her hand. "I'm so sorry." Emma gave a single, sharp nod. The tears fell without noise this time, hot and final. "Listen to me," the nurse said softly, leaning in. "You are not crazy. You are not dramatic. You are in labor, and you are the bravest goddamn woman I've seen all week." Brave. The word landed and stayed. Emma held onto it like a small, warm stone. The next contraction took her whole body, a force that demanded everything she had. She bore down when they told her to, again and again. She heard herself making sounds she'd never made before, primal and raw. Dr. Ortiz's voice cut through the fog in pieces. "Good, again. You're right there. I can see the head." Emma clutched the rails and pushed like she was pushing out every lie, every shove, every slammed door, every single fucking betrayal. The nurse's face blurred. The clock vanished. The world became one long, final, earth-shattering push. A cry split the air, high and fierce and utterly alive. Emma fell back against the pillows. The breath ripped from her lungs. The room moved in a soft, swift blur of activity. The doctor lifted a small, wet, furious human being and laid her on Emma's chest. "Hi," Emma sobbed, a laugh tangled in the word. "Hi, baby. Oh, hi." The baby opened her mouth and protested the cold, bright shock of life. Emma ran her fingers along a damp, perfect cheek and felt something inside her crack open and pour out like pure light. "What's her name?" the nurse asked, smiling with her eyes. Emma swallowed, the name she had carried in her heart since she was a little girl finally on her lips. A name that felt like strength and hope. Hope. It felt right in her mouth. The nurse wrote it down. They weighed the baby, cleaned her gently, wrapped her in a soft blanket, and gave her back. Emma held hope and stared and cried and smiled. The nurse placed a small pink hat on her head. "I'm here," Emma whispered to the tiny bundle. "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." A few hours later, while Hope slept in the bassinet and the room held the quiet hum of a new morning, a different nurse came in with paperwork. "Any family we should call?" she asked. Emma shook her head. "No, it's just us." The nurse nodded. "Then we'll be your family for the day." When she left, Emma reached for her phone. The screen was filled with messages, some from unknown numbers, some from old friends who had clapped and cheered at her wedding. She opened one, heard Mark's side of the story. He said you were unstable during the pregnancy and left in a rage. "Do you need help?" She closed her eyes. She opened another. He says you broke things and screamed, that you threatened him. "I'm sorry, but if that's true, maybe this is for the best." She put the phone down like it was on fire. Across town, she knew Mark was spinning his narrative, and he was good at it. He would look serious and sad, using words like safety and stability, while Vanessa rested her head on his shoulder and nodded with practiced, doe-eyed concern. "Lies," Emma said to the quiet room. "Everybody loves a good lie when it lets them feel righteous while doing nothing." She stood and shuffled slowly to the small bathroom sink. She washed her hands and looked at herself in the mirror above the paper towel dispenser. Her face was pale and swollen. Her hair was a mess. But her eyes were steady. A volunteer knocked and stuck her head in. "Do you want a photo? We take one for every new mom and baby, no cost." Emma thought of the glossy, professional photos Mark and Vanessa would soon be posting. She thought of the neighbors who had stayed inside behind their warm, safe curtains. She thought of the grape story and the way her own mother wore her judgment like a string of pearls. "Okay," she said. The volunteer used Emma's phone, told her where to stand by the window, and clicked the picture. It caught a tired woman and a tiny, precious bundle with a pink hat. the gray city morning behind them. A survivor, and her reason for surviving. "Beautiful," the volunteer said. "Want me to text it to someone for you?" Emma shook her head. "Not right now." Alone again, she reached under the thin hospital mattress and pulled out a small fabric pouch she'd tucked in her bag on instinct. Inside, folded into perfect quarters, were 2 old letters from her father. The paper was soft at the creases. She smoothed the top one out. Her father's handwriting was neat and kind, just like he'd been. "If life ever makes you doubt yourself, Emma, you remember who you are. You don't need anyone else to name you. You already have a name. And you come from a long line of people who don't break." She smiled a little, the first genuine smile in what felt like a lifetime. She whispered the rest of his words from memory, and then tucked the letters, along with another, more official-looking document, back into the pouch. Not yet, she told herself. Not tonight. She would keep her secrets where they belonged, close, safe, and far out of reach of people who used love like a weapon. The door opened again. She expected a nurse. It was Margaret. Emma's stomach dropped. "I asked you to leave." Her mother kept her distance, her face tight with disapproval. "I brought paperwork," she said, holding up a folder like a threat. "Mark asked me to explain it to you." Emma stared. "You have got to be fucking kidding me." "He thinks, given your state, it would be wise to assign him temporary guardianship, just for a month or 2, until you're stable. You can still visit, of course." "Get out," Emma said, the words clean, simple, and deadly. "You can't be alone with a newborn," Margaret pressed on, ignoring her. "It's too much for you. You never handled stress well." Emma stood up. The room swayed for a second, then settled. She spoke quietly, each word placed with deliberate, chilling precision. "You chose him. When I came to your door 2 nights ago, begging, do you remember? You looked through the peephole and you didn't open it. You texted me an hour later telling me to stop causing a scene in your respectable neighborhood." Margaret's mouth opened and closed. "I didn't want the neighbors involved. You wanted to be comfortable," Emma corrected. "You still do. Please leave." Her mother's eyes flashed with something that looked like fear, or maybe just rage at being defied. "You'll regret pushing me away." Emma stared at her mother for a long, final moment. Then she turned her back, lifted her baby from the bassinet, and held her close. That was answer enough. Margaret left. The door shut. The air in the room felt cleaner, lighter. The day moved on. Nurses came and went. Someone brought a tray with dry toast and orange juice. Hope cried and fed and slept and cried again. Emma learned the small, intimate language of her daughter, what each sound meant, the difference between hunger and discomfort, the tiny sigh that meant she was full and content. In the afternoon, a hospital chaplain knocked and asked if she wanted to talk. Emma thanked him and said, "Not today." He nodded and left a pamphlet on the tray table. By evening, the city had turned to gold outside her window. Emma sat with Hope sleeping on her chest and watched the light change. Her phone buzzed one last time. A message from an old friend. "He says you're sick." "Are you okay?" Emma typed, deleted, and typed again. She finally settled on 3 words. "I'm a mother." She turned the phone face down and focused on the warm, solid weight of her baby and the sound of her breathing. The room was quiet. The world could talk to itself. For now, it was just them. Hope's cries echoed through the one-room apartment, bouncing off the cracked plaster walls and the ceiling that dripped a steady rhythm into a bucket whenever it rained. Emma sat up on the lumpy mattress on the floor, pulling her daughter against her chest. The night was cold. The only heat came from the thin blanket wrapped around them both. "Shh, there, sweetheart," Emma whispered, rocking gently. "Mommy's here. Mommy's not going anywhere." Her stomach growled, a hollow, aching protest, but she ignored it. She hadn't eaten since yesterday, and the hunger made her dizzy. But the baby needed to eat more. When dawn broke, a pale gray light filtering through the grimy window, Emma put Hope in a second-hand stroller with one squeaky wheel and walked to the bus stop. She carried her work uniform, a drab gray smock, folded neatly in a worn-out bag. The city rushed around her, a river of people who didn't see her. Businessmen in crisp suits clutching coffee, students with headphones blocking out the world, and other mothers, white mothers, pushing shiny, expensive strollers that cost more than her entire month's rent. Emma walked slower, every step a reminder of the bone-deep exhaustion she couldn't shake. Her first job of the day was scrubbing floors in a wealthy downtown condo. "Don't use too much water on the hardwoods," the homeowner, a thin blonde woman in pearls named Cynthia, said without making eye contact. "It leaves streaks." "Yes, ma'am," Emma replied softly, her voice flat. The woman hovered, her phone pressed to her ear. "Oh my God, yes, I heard Mark Bennett remarried already. Can you believe it? That poor Emma. Though between us, maybe it's for the best. She was unstable, you know. They say she was screaming in the street while she was in labor. Just completely lost it. So aggressive." Emma's grip tightened on the mop handle until her knuckles were white. She lowered her head, letting her hair fall forward so the woman couldn't see the hot tears of shame and rage stinging her eyes. The woman drifted into another room, her voice a continuous stream of poisonous gossip. Emma's chest rose and fell sharply, but she didn't say a word. She had no defense. The world had already heard Mark's story, and they believed it. A hysterical black woman and her stable, long-suffering white husband. It was a story as old as time. At night, Emma worked the late shift at a greasy spoon diner. She smiled through aching feet and carried trays of burgers and fries that felt heavier than her tired arms wanted to hold. Hope slept in a neighbor's apartment down the hall, a kind, elderly woman who charged her next to nothing. She was safe, but she was far from Emma's reach, and the separation felt like a physical ache. One evening, two women she vaguely recognized from her old neighborhood slid into a corner booth. "Oh my God, is that Emma?" one whispered loudly to the other. "Yeah, look at her, waiting tables. Jesus, Mark really upgraded, didn't he? That Vanessa woman is gorgeous. Did you see their wedding photos on Instagram?" Emma placed their plates down with steady hands, though her face burned with humiliation. "She looks so bitter," the other one whispered as Emma walked away. "Pathetic." Emma gripped the stainless steel counter in the kitchen until her knuckles whitened. She wanted to scream, to throw a plate, to prove them right. But she didn't. She just kept moving, kept smiling, kept working. Meanwhile, Mark and Vanessa lived like royalty. Their wedding was the talk of the city. Photos were everywhere. White roses hanging from crystal chandeliers, a cake taller than Emma, Vanessa's massive diamond ring flashing in every goddamn shot. "Finally found the love I deserve," Mark posted online. "Starting our forever in the home we built together." "Our home," Vanessa captioned her photo. But Emma knew that home. Every room, every chair, every wall she had painted with her own hands. Her roses, the ones she had carefully planted and tended in the garden, were now the backdrop for Vanessa's triumphant selfies. Her phone buzzed with notifications, tags from people who hadn't forgotten her but wanted to make sure she saw. She read the comments, torturing herself. She looks so much happier than Emma ever did. Mark deserves some peace after what he went through. Vanessa is a real wife. Not like that unstable, angry ex. Emma closed the app, her hands shaking. The lies traveled faster and farther than any truth she could ever tell. At the grocery store, they say Emma threw plates at him. The poor man had no choice. At the laundromat, I heard she still calls him, crying and begging. So pathetic, isn't it? Emma clenched her jaw, folding Hope's tiny clothes in silence. Even her own mother, Margaret, repeated the lies as gospel. One desperate afternoon, Emma tried calling her. "Mom, can you watch Hope for a few hours? I have a chance to pick up a double shift." Margaret sighed, a long, suffering sound. "Emma, I can't keep rescuing you from your poor decisions. Mark told me how unstable you've been. Frankly, you scare people. Maybe if you had just been calmer, quieter." Emma's voice broke. "You believe him?" "I believe what I see," Margaret said coldly. "And what I see is a daughter who made her bed and now has to lie in it. Don't bring your drama to my doorstep." The call ended. Emma sat in the echoing silence of her tiny apartment, her baby gurgling happily on a blanket beside her, too young and innocent to know the cruelty of words. Vanessa, for her part, made sure to fan the flames. At a lavish brunch with her friends, she leaned back, a smirk playing on her lips. "Emma keeps calling the house, you guys, just begging Mark to come back. Can you even imagine the desperation?" Gasps of performative sympathy circled the table. "She's so pathetic," Vanessa laughed. "A jealous little ghost haunting us. Honestly, she's just embarrassing herself." One night, exhausted after finally getting Hope to sleep, Emma pulled a heavy wooden chest from under her mattress. It was old and scratched, with iron hinges that creaked like a haunted house. Inside were the papers her late father had left for her. His letters, old stock certificates, and a thick, sealed envelope. Emma carefully unfolded the trust document. Her eyes traced the numbers she already knew by heart. $20 million. Locked away, safe, legally and indisputably hers once she chose to claim it. She touched the crisp paper as if it were alive. The world thought she was a poor, pathetic, broken-down single mother. They mocked her. Even her own mother treated her like a burden. But she held a secret, powerful enough to burn their world to the ground. She stroked the edge of the papers, then leaned over and kissed her daughter's forehead. "Not yet, baby girl," she whispered. "They'll never see it coming." She closed the chest and slid it back under the mattress, a sleeping dragon beneath her bed. Across town, Vanessa was starting to notice the cracks in Mark's perfect facade. She came home early one afternoon, her heels clicking on the imported tile of the foyer. Laughter drifted from the living room. Female laughter. Not hers. She stepped inside and froze. Mark was on the couch, leaning intimately close to a young, blonde woman. His hand was casually brushing her arm. "So, dinner tonight?" he murmured. The woman giggled. "You're terrible." Vanessa cleared her throat. The air in the room snapped taut. "Vanessa," Mark said smoothly, standing up without a trace of guilt. "This is a business contact, an intern from legal." The blonde grabbed her purse, her face flushing. I should go." When the door shut, Vanessa crossed her arms. "Business?" "Yes, business," Mark said, already annoyed. "An important client project. Don't make a scene." "She was touching your arm, Mark," Vanessa snapped. "You're imagining things," he said, rolling his eyes with the same casual dismissal he'd once used on Emma. Vanessa's chest burned with a sudden, cold fury. She forced a laugh, though her nails were digging into her palms. "Fine. Business." She walked upstairs, her bright smile fading the second the bedroom door closed behind her. For the first time, she wondered if, maybe, just maybe, Emma had been telling the truth all along. Back in her small apartment, Emma fought to survive. She cleaned offices at dawn, waited tables in the evening, and sewed clothing for a small online boutique at night by the dim light of a single lamp. Her fingers were raw and sometimes bled from the needle, but she kept working. One night, her neighbor knocked on the door. "Emma, people are still talking," she said gently. "They're saying you're bitter, that you just want to ruin Mark's new life." Emma looked over at her sleeping daughter, a perfect, peaceful angel. A faint, knowing smile touched her lips. "Let them talk." The neighbor frowned. "Doesn't it bother you?" "It used to," Emma said, her voice quiet but strong. "Now it just reminds me of who I'll never be again." The city didn't care. Her friends had vanished. Her family had betrayed her. Mark flaunted Vanessa. Vanessa spread lies. Margaret chose comfort over her own child. But Emma's eyes were steady now. Her back was straighter. Every whisper of pathetic and unstable only added fuel to the fire growing in her chest. Her struggle was temporary. Her strength was permanent. And one day, very soon, the same people who mocked her would choke on their fucking laughter. The thick glass of Mark Bennett's corner office window seemed to shake when he slammed the quarterly report down on his massive mahogany desk. "What the ever-loving fuck is this?" he barked, glaring at his terrified young assistant. The young man shifted nervously. It's the quarterly numbers, sir." "These numbers are shit," Mark snapped. "They have to be wrong. They came straight from accounting, sir." "Then fire fucking accounting," Mark shouted, pacing the length of his office like a caged tiger. First Henderson pulls his investment, now the Whitmore deal completely collapses. 2 major partners in less than a goddamn month. Do you have any idea what this looks like? The assistant swallowed hard. "Like trouble, sir." Mark's jaw clenched so tight a muscle jumped in his cheek. He turned his back to the room, staring out at the city skyline as if it had personally betrayed him. "Someone's behind this. Someone's actively trying to bring me down." "Dion," the assistant hesitated. "Sir, there is something else. An anonymous investor has been buying up shares in Bennett Global, very quietly. They've already acquired almost 10%. Mark's head whipped around. "What?" "Legal can't identify them yet. They're using a series of holding companies, shells, but they're moving fast." Mark snatched the paper from his assistant's trembling hands and scanned it, his face turning a blotchy red. "Anonymous investor," he muttered. "Fucking cowards hiding behind paper trails. They think they can play games with me? With me?" He slammed the paper back down on the desk. "Get the fuck out, now!" The assistant scrambled away, leaving Mark alone with his mounting fury. At home, Vanessa found him pouring a whiskey at noon. His tie was loose, his expensive hair disheveled. "Another bad day at the office, darling?" she asked, setting her designer purse on the counter. Mark glared at the amber liquid in his glass. "They're circling me like fucking vultures." "Who is?" "Everyone. Partners are pulling out, investors are whispering, and some anonymous bastard is buying up my company from behind my back." Vanessa leaned gracefully against the counter. "Maybe it's just business, Mark. The market shifts." Mark slammed the glass down, whiskey sloshing over the rim. "Don't you dare patronize me, Vanessa. This isn't random. This is a targeted attack. Someone is coming for me." She held up her hands in a gesture of surrender. "I'm just saying." "No, you're implying I'm paranoid," he growled. "But I know what I built, and I know when someone is trying to tear it all down." Vanessa studied him, a cool, calculating look in her eyes. Her lips curled into a tiny smile he didn't notice. "And what if they succeed?" she murmured. "What if they're smarter than you?" Mark's head snapped up. "What did you just say?" "Nothing, darling," she said smoothly, turning away. "Just relax. But as she walked out of the room, her smile sharpened. That night, Vanessa met an old acquaintance in the dim, smoky corner of a quiet hotel bar. Charles Whitmore, one of Mark's chief business rivals. "You shouldn't be seen here, Vanessa," Charles said, swirling the ice in his drink. "Then don't look so pleased with yourself," she murmured, sliding into the leather booth across from him. "What do you want, Mrs. Bennet?" "Insurance," she said simply. "Mark is slipping. His arrogance is finally catching up with him, and I don't plan to sink with his ship." Charles raised a skeptical eyebrow. "And what exactly are you offering?" "Information," Vanessa whispered, leaning closer, her voice a conspiratorial hiss. "Names of key suppliers, details of his upcoming deals, the things he doesn't even tell his own board yet." Charles studied her, a slow, predatory smile spreading across his face. "Why betray him?" Vanessa's smile was just as cold. "Because he betrayed Emma. Because he's already betraying me. And because men like Mark Bennet are only faithful to one thing, themselves. I'm just learning from the master." "I like you," Charles said with a chuckle. "You're ruthless. Send me something useful, and I'll make sure you have a very comfortable landing when the dust finally clears." Vanessa clinked her glass against his. "Deal." Across town, Emma Parker stepped out of a black town car in a quiet, elegant neighborhood she'd only ever dreamed of. Her daughter, Hope, was with a trusted babysitter for the evening. Emma's dress was simple but impeccably tailored. Her shoes clicked confidently against the polished marble floor as she entered the lobby of a sleek skyscraper. The receptionist straightened immediately. "Good afternoon, Ms. Parker. Mr. Hawthorne is expecting you." Emma nodded. "Thank you." The elevator doors whispered open, and she caught her reflection in the mirrored walls. This was not the tired, hunched woman begging for cleaning jobs. Her shoulders were back, her eyes were sharp, her expression was serene. When the doors slid open again on the top floor, a tall, distinguished man in a gray suit greeted her with a warm handshake. "Emma," he said, his voice rich with respect. "Always a pleasure." "Thank you for seeing me, Mr. Hawthorne," she said softly. He guided her into his office, a magnificent room lined with law books and radiating quiet power. "You've been patient," he said, opening a thick file on his desk. "Extremely patient. The trust your father left you is untouched. $20 million, every cent intact." Emma looked out the floor-to-ceiling window at the city sprawling below her. "And legally, there's nothing Mark can do?" "Absolutely nothing," Hawthorne confirmed, a grim satisfaction in his tone. "It's ironclad. Your father was a very smart man. He anticipated men like Mark. This money is yours and yours alone." Emma let the words settle over her, a balm on old wounds. Her heartbeat was slow and steady. "Then it's time," she said, her voice clear and firm. "Let's begin." Hawthorne smiled. "As you wish, Miss Parker." For the first time in years, someone spoke her name, not with pity or contempt, but with respect. Emma's lips curved into the faintest, most dangerous of smiles. Back in her small apartment, she tucked Hope into bed. The old wooden chest still sat under the mattress, but now its weight felt different. It wasn't just a secret anymore. It was a weapon. She sat on the edge of the bed and whispered, "We're not just surviving anymore, baby. We're building. And one day soon, you'll see the life we deserved all along." Hope stirred in her sleep, her tiny hand curling around Emma's finger. Emma's eyes glistened, but her smile held. Margaret was the first to notice the change. Her daughter no longer looked broken. She stood straighter. Her clothes, though still simple, were cleaner, sharper. There was a calm, unnerving confidence in her eyes that deeply unsettled Margaret. So one afternoon, she showed up unannounced at Emma's door. Emma opened it slowly, her expression hardening. "Mom." Margaret pushed past her without waiting for an invitation, her heels clicking on the worn linoleum. "You've been busy," she said, her eyes darting around the tidy apartment, a suspicious glint in them. "Where is all this newfound composure coming from?" Emma crossed her arms. "It's called work, responsibility." "Don't lie to me," Margaret snapped. "I know you, Emma. You've never carried yourself like this. You've got something. Money. Help? Who the hell gave it to you?" Emma's eyes narrowed. "Why do you care?" Margaret let out a short, ugly laugh. "Because I deserve to know. I'm your mother. And maybe if you've finally come into something, you can repay me for all the years I had to carry you." Emma's stomach twisted into a knot of cold fury. "Carry me? You sided with the man who threw me into the street. You called me unstable while I was giving birth to your only grandchild." Margaret waved a dismissive hand. "I was being practical. Mark had stability. You were emotional, reckless. I did what was best for the baby." Emma stepped closer, her voice low and sharp as a razor. "Don't you dare pretend you did anything for my daughter. You turned your back on us. You chose him." Margaret's eyes glinted with greed. "If you found money, you owe me. Don't forget who raised you. Don't forget who can still talk." Emma held her mother's gaze, her own voice dropping to a deadly calm. "You chose Mark. When the ground finally falls out from under you, remember you were the one who dug your own fucking grave. Now get out of my apartment." Margaret blinked, stunned into silence. For once in her life, Emma's voice was sharper than hers. Emma pointed to the door. "Leave." Margaret's mouth opened, then closed. Finally, she turned on her heel and stormed out, her perfume lingering behind her like a poisonous fog. Emma shut the door, her hands trembling, not from fear, but from a surge of righteous power. For the first time, she felt taller than her mother. Meanwhile, Mark's world continued to implode. At an emergency board meeting, he slammed his hand against the polished conference table. "You're all a bunch of fucking cowards. Walking out now when things get a little tough? You think Bennett Global falls without me? You think I'll let that happen?" One of the older board members cleared his throat. "It's not about you, Mark. It's about confidence. The investors are nervous." "Because someone is spreading poisonous lies," Mark barked. Another director spoke quietly. "It's not lies, Mark. The numbers don't lie, and the anonymous investor, whoever they are, has already secured another significant block of shares. At this rate, you could be outvoted at the next shareholder meeting." Mark's face turned a deep, alarming shade of crimson. "Never." Vanessa sat in the back of the room, legs crossed, watching him unravel with a detached, clinical interest. She took a slow sip of her water, hiding her smirk. After the meeting, she slipped into the ladies' room and sent a text message. "He's losing it. Tonight I'll send you the supplier contracts. They'll cut him off by next quarter." The reply came back almost instantly. "Good. The end is closer than he knows." Vanessa smiled at her reflection in the mirror. She adjusted her lipstick and whispered to herself, "Insurance." Emma, too, looked at her reflection that night, but hers showed something entirely different. Strength. Calm. A woman who had been shattered into a million pieces and had meticulously, painstakingly rebuilt herself into something stronger. She adjusted the collar of her coat, tucked Hope's blanket tighter around her, and whispered into the quiet of the night. "They think I'm gone. They think I'm weak. They're about to fucking learn." Her voice wasn't bitter. It was steady. It was certain. It was the sound of the coming storm. The crystal chandeliers of the grand ballroom blazed, scattering golden light across marble floors polished to a mirror shine. Waiters in crisp white jackets moved like silent shadows, balancing silver trays of champagne. Cameras flashed like angry fireflies as the city's richest and most powerful people mingled, their laughter echoing in the cavernous space. At the very center of it all stood Mark Bennett, his smile stretched tight and practiced, his hand resting possessively on Vanessa's waist. He wore a custom black tuxedo, his tie knotted so tight it looked like it was choking him. He lifted his glass in greeting as reporters circled him like sharks. "Mr. Bennett," one of them called out, "what do you have to say about the persistent rumors of financial trouble at Bennett Global?" Mark let out a chuckle, as smooth and oily as his hair. "Rumors are a poor man's entertainment. My company is thriving. Tonight's gala proves that. Just look around. The city's finest are all here to support us." The crowd offered a smattering of polite, obligatory laughter. Vanessa leaned in close, her diamond earrings catching the light. "Smile bigger, you idiot," she whispered through her teeth. "They can smell fear." "I'm not fucking nervous," Mark muttered back, though his hand trembled slightly on the stem of his champagne flute. "Good," Vanessa purred, leaning in for a photo. Flash, flash, flash. The cameras loved them. They were the golden couple. For a moment, Mark almost believed the lie he was selling, that he was still untouchable, that this was a minor setback. But then the music faltered. Heads began to turn toward the grand staircase at the far end of the ballroom. A hush spread through the crowd like a ripple in a dark pond. And there she was, Emma Parker. She descended the staircase slowly, each step deliberate and measured. Her gown was liquid silver, shimmering under the chandeliers, clinging to a body strengthened by hard work, not softened by luxury. Her hair was swept back, revealing the clean, proud lines of her face. Her expression was utterly serene. This was not the broken, abandoned woman in stained sweatpants. She carried herself like a queen who had come to reclaim her throne. The crowd gasped. Whispers flew like sparks in the dark. "Is that Emma? My God, she looks incredible. Didn't Mark leave her while she was in labor?" Mark's champagne glass slipped in his hand. The color drained from his face, leaving it a pasty, sickly white. "What the holy hell is she doing here?" he hissed to Vanessa. Vanessa stiffened, her own perfect smile freezing on her face. "Ignore her. She's a nobody." But no one else could. Emma walked straight into the center of the ballroom, the crowd parting before her as if by magic. The spotlight seemed to follow her. She raised her chin, her gaze sweeping over the sea of stunned faces, and spoke. Her voice was calm, but it commanded the attention of the entire room. "Good evening." The chatter died instantly. Mark forced a laugh, loud and jarring in the sudden silence. "Emma, I didn't know they were letting just anyone in tonight." A few uncomfortable chuckles fluttered through the audience. Vanessa smirked, trying to regain control. Emma's eyes flicked to him, sharp and completely unbothered. "Don't worry, Mark, I was invited. By the board." The crowd gasped audibly. Mark blinked. "The board? What the fuck are you talking about?" Emma turned slightly. Her attorney, Mr. Hawthorne, stepped forward out of the crowd, handing her a folder and a small remote. Emma opened the folder with steady, deliberate hands. "Tonight," she announced, her voice ringing with clarity, "an anonymous investor is going to reveal themselves, the investor who, for months, has been quietly buying up shares of Bennett Global until they became the majority shareholder." Mark's laugh was cracked and brittle. "Well, whoever it is, they should be thanking me. Without me, they wouldn't have a pot to piss in. let alone a company worth buying. Emma simply pressed a button on the remote. Massive screens around the ballroom, previously displaying the Bennett Global logo, flickered to life. They showed a complex web of documents, transactions, holding companies, and finally, a single name, bold and undeniable. "It's me," she said simply. "Emma Parker." The room erupted. Gasps, shouts, a blinding barrage of camera flashes. Mark staggered back a step as if he'd been physically struck. That's impossible. You're broke. You wait tables." A faint, cold smile touched Emma's lips. "I inherited $20 million from my father, secured in an ironclad trust you could never, ever touch. While you and your friends were mocking me, calling me pathetic, I was investing, quietly, patiently, and tonight I own what you thought could never be taken from you." The whispers in the crowd turned to open laughter, not at Emma, at Mark. "You had $20 million? Mark stammered, his face a grotesque mask of disbelief and rage. "And you let me think you were broke?" "You never asked," Emma said, her voice cutting like a shard of ice. "Because you never loved me. You only loved the idea of my father's money. You just didn't know he was smarter than you." The board chair, a formidable woman named Evelyn Torres, stepped forward. "As of this evening, Ms. Parker holds a controlling interest in Bennett Global. Effective immediately, Mark Bennett is removed as CEO." The crowd gasped again, the sound like a collective punch to the gut. Mark's face twisted in fury. "You can't do this. This is my company." "Not anymore," Evelyn said coolly. Vanessa's hand slipped from Mark's arm. Her face had gone chalk white, but Emma wasn't finished. "Tonight isn't just about control," she said, clicking the remote again. "It's about the truth." The screens flickered, now displaying old emails from Mark's server. His own words, magnified for all to see. "Her father's money is real. I'll lock it down after the wedding. If the trust is separate property, I'll push for dependency. She'll fold. She always does." "He used her," a woman in the front row muttered. Mark shook his head violently. "Those are fake. They're lies." "Pulled directly from your server this morning under court order," Hawthorne said firmly. The crowd murmured, the tide of their opinion turning against him with brutal speed. Emma's eyes stayed locked on Mark. "You never wanted me. You wanted what you thought I carried." Mark's mouth opened and closed, making him look like a drowning fish. Emma clicked the remote again. New messages appeared on the screen. This time, they weren't his. They were Vanessa's. "He's slipping. Tonight I'll send you the supplier contracts. Don't worry, I'll make sure his rivals have everything they need." The crowd gasped again. Vanessa's eyes widened in horror. "That's doctored!" she shrieked. "Pulled from your personal cloud storage," Hawthorne said, his voice flat. Mark whirled on her, his face contorted with betrayal. You backstabbing bitch!" Vanessa sneered back at him, her fear replaced by venom. "You betrayed me first. You've never been faithful to anyone. I just learned the game quicker than Emma did." "Don't you dare compare yourself to me," Emma said, her voice slicing through Vanessa's bravado with cold contempt. The screen shifted one last time. This time, it showed bank transfers, jewelry purchases, and notes in Mark's handwriting. "Thank you for agreeing to support my version of events in court. The baby will be better off with a stable parent. The recipient of the funds, Margaret, Emma's mother." Emma's voice didn't shake. "My own mother took money to testify against me, to help label me an unstable, unfit mother. While I was scrubbing floors to feed my child, she was cashing his checks." The crowd gasped, horrified. Heads turned toward the back of the room, where Margaret stood frozen, her face a mess of shame and terror. Emma, please, she stammered. You chose him over me when I was on my knees begging for help, Emma said, her voice low but carrying across the silent room. Don't speak my name now. Margaret's face crumpled. She tried to push her way out of the ballroom, but people literally pulled away from her, their faces masks of disgust. The room buzzed with the raw, delicious spectacle of betrayal and humiliation. Emma stepped down from the low stage and walked toward Mark. His face was pale, his jaw trembling. You threw me out while I was carrying your child, Emma said quietly, so only those nearest could hear. You told me to go die. You thought I was nothing. But the pain you gave me, it became my fuel. The stones you threw, I used them to build an empire. Mark shook his head violently, his arrogance finally shattered. No, you don't understand. We can fix this. You and me, together. We'll tell them. You'll tell them more lies, Emma cut in. It's all you know how to do. He dropped to his knees, his hands shaking, his bespoke tuxedo suddenly looking like a cheap costume. Please, Emma, don't take everything from me. Emma's gaze didn't soften for a second. I'm not taking anything from you, Mark. I'm taking back what was already mine. The crowd began to clap. First a few, then more, until it became a thunderous ovation. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras captured every angle of Mark's complete and utter destruction. Vanessa slipped toward the side door, but people whispered and pointed as she passed. Traitor, snake, ruined. She disappeared into the night without a backward glance. Margaret, blocked at one exit, finally managed to slink out another, a pariah in her own social circle. And Mark. Mark knelt alone in the center of the grand ballroom, the man who had thought himself a king, now stripped bare and broken before the entire city. Emma looked down at him one last time, her voice carrying over the din. Betrayal always circles back, Mark, and tonight it found you. She turned and walked away, the crowd parting for her like the Red Sea. Heads bowed, whispers of admiration followed her. Outside, her car was waiting. In the back, Hope slept peacefully in her car seat, safe and warm. Emma climbed in, leaned over, and kissed her child's forehead. We're free, she whispered. The car pulled away from the curb, the city lights glittering like scattered diamonds. Emma Parker hadn't risen by destroying them. She had risen by rebuilding herself, and nothing, not betrayal, not lies, not even love lost, could ever take that away from her again. 1 year later, the name on the skyscraper was no longer Bennett Global. It was Parker Industries. The corner office, once Mark's, was now Emma's. It had been completely redecorated. The dark, heavy mahogany was gone, replaced with light wood, modern art, and floor-to-ceiling windows that bathed the room in sunlight. Emma stood looking out at the city, a city that was now hers. She wore a sharp, elegant dress, and her expression was one of calm, confident command. Hope's latest finger painting was framed and hung proudly on the wall behind her desk. Her intercom buzzed. Ms. Parker, her executive assistant's voice came through. The final candidate for the junior assistant position is here. Send her in, please, Maria. The door opened. A woman walked in, her head bowed, her shoulders slumped. Her hair was a mousy brown, a cheap box dye job. She wore a drab, ill-fitting suit. It took a moment for the eye to reconcile this humbled, diminished figure with the memory of the glittering blonde from the gala. It was Vanessa. She stopped in the middle of the vast office, not daring to look up. Miss Parker, she mumbled, thank you for seeing me. Emma turned slowly from the window, her face unreadable. She walked to her desk and sat down, gesturing to the chair opposite her. Vanessa sat stiffly on the very edge of it. Your resume is sparse, Emma said, her voice neutral as she glanced at the paper in front of her. After you left the city, it seems you had trouble finding stable employment. Vanessa's voice was hoarse. No one would hire me. The story, it followed me everywhere. The truth, you mean? Emma corrected softly. The truth followed you. Vanessa flinched. Finally, she looked up, her eyes filled with a desperate, pathetic plea. I have nothing left, Emma. Please, I'll do anything. I'll file, I'll get coffee, I'll work weekends. I need a job. Emma leaned back in her chair, studying the woman who had helped orchestrate her deepest pain. She saw no remorse in Vanessa's eyes, only the terror of a fallen queen forced to beg for scraps. Emma was silent for a long, torturous minute. Vanessa started to tremble. Then Emma leaned forward, her voice dropping to a quiet, precise tone. You will start on Monday. You will be responsible for scheduling, managing my dry cleaning, and fetching my lunch. Your desk will be outside this office, where I can see you. You will be paid minimum wage, and you will address me only as Ms. Parker. Are we clear? A flicker of the old, arrogant Vanessa sparked in her eyes, a flash of indignation, but it was quickly extinguished by raw desperation. Tears welled. Yes, she choked out. Yes, Ms. Parker, crystal clear. Good, Emma said, her voice devoid of all emotion. Because I want you to have a front row seat. I want you to watch me run this company. I want you to see the woman you called pathetic and the child you called a little project thrive. I want you to be reminded every single day of what happens when you underestimate the woman you tried to bury. She picked up her pen and signed a document, her signature a bold, confident stroke. Now get out, she said without looking up. I have work to do.